My name is Jason Russell. I'm working as an intern for the Alaska State Library, and I've been doing that for about a year. One of the major projects that they had me do was a web usability study of the Alaska State Library website, and this is kind of just an outgrowth of that. And that's essentially that, if you have any other questions. But I would like to have each of you introduce yourselves. So to start with, could I have, the lady who's reaching towards the phone.
Okay, me?
You, yeah.
Okay, I'm Sigrid Broody. I'm a medical librarian here at the University of Alaska. So, and one of my jobs over there is putting together the Arctic Health website, adding content, and we've been trying to make it more usable. So we work with National Library of Medicine on developing this website. So I'm always looking for tips and tricks for doing usability testing for websites.
All right, that sounds great. And, it's the focus of this study will be especially on low cost. So trying to do it for as little as little of a price tag at the very end as possible. And it's the list. I mean, I'll get into it, but it should go pretty good. Could I have the lady tan? Is that a tan blouse?
Sure.
I'm never good with colors. Yeah.
I am Aubrey Raby, and I'm with the Alaska Fire Standards Council, and just looking to learn how to do usability studies with low cost, because we are a very, very small department of just 2 people, or division of just 2 people in the whole state, and we have a very small budget. So.
Yeah, those kind of seem like the name of the game, especially right now, especially with among other things, sequestration and just general budget cuts or budget limitations, anyways. So. That said, before I get into it, the presentation, I would like to say if you do have any questions, feel free to pipe in. If you have anything that's not necessarily related, but you think might be something to bring up or just discuss, perhaps it would be best just to hold it until after I finish. So I'm just going to get right into it. And another thing, I've kind of designed this to, it's going to take you from basically the beginning, so figuring out, do I need a study, and what do you do from there, to presenting your results. And so, yeah.
Will the presentation be available to us?
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to ask. I am more than happy. Well, there's actually another form that at the very end I cover just how to present or put together a document, and that would either so how to put together a document to illustrate your results. And if I could get, whoever wants it, if I could get your email address, I'll be more than happy to send that, as well as I can send you the data from part of the usability study itself. And I'll kind of get into this later, but it's from Excel, and it's just kind of how, again, I'll touch on this later, but it'll be a good kind of illustration to show you just kind of what stuff you can do with, it's called pivot tables, but it's a way to organize and see patterns within your results. So absolutely, yes. Okay, so conducting low-cost website usability studies. And what is website usability? I'm sure you guys know it's essentially the practice of ensuring that a website is findable, so intuitive, up-to-date, and well-maintained. So it's able to attract the users, keep the users once you have them. It's authoritative, so i.e. the information that you're presenting or the information that you have on the site isn't outdated, or if it's outdated, you have, maybe you push that into a PDF or something and you have an updated document with whatever you've got, whatever information you have on it. And I say well-maintained because with how interconnected the internet obviously is, if you're having links up to date, if your website is the Alaska State Library, one of the things on the Alaska State Library is that they have links that link obviously to numerous other institutions or other state websites. And if those links aren't well maintained, if they're not positioned properly, you're going to lose. The users are going to have a lot more issues with that. So what I will cover, it's going to be 4 sections. So it's going to be project management, how to develop a project plan, actually performing the study, and then once you have the study performed, reviewing the data and presenting, and getting a document ready for presenting the results. I'm not going to cover how to present the results. I figured you guys could figure that out. But yeah. So I started with this slide because it essentially is that you generally you can generally know if your site is having some issues, or kind of get the general feel that, hey, this site it's got some kinks to it, and it's got a high learning curve. So basically, that said, if you know that your site needs some work, the next step is, can you do the work yourself, or do you have to hire an outside team, or do you even know exactly what is wrong with the site itself? And there are experts for almost everything nowadays, and as in the case also with usability, there are numerous usability groups out there that you can contact, and they basically subcontract out. So in this case, the Nielsen Norman group or the Bot Usability group. Those are two. I picked those just because one's on the upper end of the price range, one's kind of on the lower end of the price range, but they're all kind of somewhere right in the middle of their between 10 to 40,000 or 2,500 to 4,000. And those prices, they are so variable because usability studies are variable. If you're analyzing a website that's got 60 subpages, obviously it's going to cost more, and then the price is going to go a lot higher. Bot usability is so cheap because they rely on a lot of expert reviews. If you have the once you start trying to get in attract test participants and having the right test participants to test, that tends to make the price a lot higher. And I contacted VOT, and she essentially confirmed that it's just that the needs of the website administrators are so variable, and that's why there's such a variance in price. And so naturally, you're here because you can't afford to contract out to an outside group. So where do you start? Well, you want to try to put a team together naturally to figure out what's going on with your site. And the thing to remember though is, even if the team itself, you may not be shelling out money, there's still funds, departmental funds that are being used in terms of hourly wages, and if you have to do a lot of travel, there's gas and all that sort of stuff. So even if you're still just doing it internally, there is funds, it does come with a price tag. And in addition, the price tag can also be in stress from the team members because they're having to do this usability test and also manage all of their normal day-to-day duties, especially if your department's only 2 people. So that does make it quite difficult. One way to kind of mitigate these prices is by utilizing interns or volunteers. And that, of course, everyone says, okay, let's just get an intern. Well, how do you get an intern? Or how do you get the right intern for your project? And naturally, that is kind of the $1,000 question, so to speak. The state library here, luckily, I had a lot of library and informational science students. Those generally have the skill sets that you need, so long as they're focused on, so long as they have tech experience and like interacting with the public. And that, so that said, in these next couple slides, I'll go over how to try to get those interns. And I have some lists. They need to be self-motivated, proactive, and that sort of stuff. But attracting, if you're in a community that, well, how do you attract the right interns? Well, if you want to try to get a library and informational science intern, then quite likely, or it might very well likely be that you can't find one locally. So a good way to get around that is by going digital. With Illuminate and Blackboard and all that sort of stuff, web conferencing is really quite easy to do nowadays. So I wouldn't be afraid to try to seek intern help, and even if they're in a different state, you can still utilize them to help develop the plan, to help develop the flyers or whatnot for the testing itself, to help doing some of the legwork, phone calls, and contacting different individuals in your community for getting test participants. So with going digital, the ALA, so American Library Association, they do have a great database that does list all accredited programs, and they link to those websites. So basically, you go there, find one that's closest to you. Obviously, we're in Alaska, so they don't have an LIS program up here, but it's that's something that you can that's an option that you do have. That said, once you kind of have your team well-rounded, even if it's only just a couple people, having the responsibilities delegated out is a good thing. It's a lot better. It saves a lot of time saying, okay, I will take the lead on this in terms of directing where this usability study will be going. If there are any issues, I will kind of be the moderator and try to resolve these issues. It's great to have a democratically organized group. However, in times when confrontations arise and differing opinions arise, having a leader in the group will save you time and frustration and all of that sort of stuff down the road. So that's essentially how you would form your team. And once you have your team formed, now comes the hard part of figuring out just how to develop your project. So this section, that'll cover figuring out what the test, choosing the participants, and the most cost-effective testing methods to utilize. So figuring out what to test. Well, how do you test, get a test that's focused enough that you can essentially get a product at the end that's usable and done in a decent amount of time? And remember, time is money here, so you need to get it done as quickly as possible. So that said, a good way to kind of wrap your head around exactly what your website might need is spending some time reviewing the mission and vision statements, if any that are already created for that website. So basically, how was the website founded? to begin with? What are the short, mid, and long-term goals for building the website, for attaining users? I mean, there's all this information that potentially is already there on the website, just to help you figure out what this website was purposed for. I mean, it should be obvious, but including those vision statements and all of that sort of stuff will add authority to your product, so to your test results once you get it done and once you're presenting it to your supervisors, because they'll see that and they'll be like, oh, okay, she or he based this test on the vision statements and these goals and da 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 da, and they'll be more keen to accept your corrections for that website. And another good tip for doing usability testing is, I mean, I've done quite a bit of research and probably looked through about 40 or 50 different tests, usability tests, and I've come to the kind of personal opinion or personal belief that you should include your home page for any testing, if only to show, or well, to kind of center your testing. So if you find that there's one section of the website that's really confuses users, or they just don't know what's going on, or it's just outdated, including the home page, and I have this neat little description here. Yeah, just imagine it as an airport, and the destinations offered at the airport are the different parts of the site that you want to direct your users to. So the airplane, of course, being the path to get the users to there in the least amount of effort and wasted time and all that sort of stuff. So if you have that airport, if you have that home page really spot on and designed with your users in mind, then it'll make redesigning the satellite sections of the page of the site itself a lot easier and more effective. So figuring out what to test, a good idea is to utilize, basically to get a feel for what's going on. So preliminary surveys, comments from the staff, feedback from users, they all help you to figure out what is going wrong here, because when I first got here at the State Library, and I knew that I was going to be doing this study, as an outsider to the website, not using it that often, I was able to come up with, I think it was about 7 or 8 pages worth of issues that I personally had with the site. So as an outsider, it's a lot easier to see what's going on. If you are already familiar, comfortable, knowledgeable about the website, that's good, but really the whole point is having your users who may not be as knowledgeable or tech savvy or able to, or have as good searching skills. The point's having them know how to find the right information and be directed there in an effective manner. So knowing your users, once you know what generally needs to be tested, the next important step is to figure out what your current user base is right now, as well as what your potential future user base is going to be. So who's using your site right now, and in the future, where do you expect the users, who do you expect the users to be? And that kind of comes into play with, well, what are the short, mid, and long-term goals of the site itself? Because if you know what the long-term goals are, it's more easily understood that, hey, the long-term goals are this, that are trying to include more, say, Latinos and Latino users. And then it naturally would be that, well, okay, then I need to include Latinos in the testing itself, because it'll kind of get in line with that. And let's see, I have some notes here just for, yeah, so another good way to know your users is to do some footwork, is to go out to the, actually I'll cover that later. Knowing your users, if you have a general idea of your user base, but you're really not sure, like say for Juno, another thing that they have, or say if you want to know what the demographics of Juno are, and from there you can kind of generally get the sense that, well, if Juno's got an aging population, which they do, then it's going to be more likely that in the future you're going to have people who are older, who potentially have lower vision issues, who are perhaps less tech savvy. Knowing that information will help you out. And there are a number of sites that will help you kind of find that demographic information. I think I might cover this later, but either way, so the census.gov, they're a great place. The communities, well, at least for Juno, they generally release public documents like the 2013, I think it was Vital Statistics, and a simple search query will be able to find that out, say for your specific city. But don't be afraid to look. I mean, the documents are out there, and it's just a little bit of searching, and you should be able to find those. So once you kind of have a good idea of who you're going to be testing, the next step is figuring out, well, how many test participants should I have? Once you have the correct ratio, yeah. So if you have, it's very easy to think that, oh, okay, well, I need, the more the better for testing. Now, that's not necessarily the case. The more users that you have testing, the longer it's going to take to get those users, the more time is going to be involved in doing the testing itself. It's going to be an issue in collating the data, presenting that data, and also if and essentially you don't need dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of users, of test participants, that is to say, to figure out what's going on with your website. And I'll get into this later, but Jacob Nielsen, he's called the usability guru. That's simply because he's been doing this since '88. Actually, no, since '86, thereabouts. So he's been kind of on the ground, in the forefront since the creation of the modern internet as we know of it. And he's the one that pioneered low-cost usability. And I'll go over this in greater depth later, but essentially what he's stated that per test, so say if you have a card sort, or if you want to have a task analysis, you only really need 5 test participants. That's the optimum number of participants to use. And that'll end up revealing about 85% of the issues with the site. And and I'll provide web links, and he has statistical proof just backing this up. And it is essentially since 90 and before, no one had ever thought of that. There were 30 plus test participants and really involved testing, and it's really, the point is 5 test participants. If you really have to, 3 test participants, but 5 is kind of the ideal. And that'll end up saving time and money later down the road and for potentially doing retesting. So one of the things about attracting the user groups, I'm sure both of you have a number of good ideas for attracting user groups, or attracting users to be test participants. Of course, there's cash incentives versus simple prize refreshments. Do I need door prizes? How long should I have the notices up in my institution? And I included the degree of staff willing to help market this study. So staff participation is really key in making these things successful. If you have a number of individuals on staff that interact with the public, having those staff be willing now and then to kind of drop the dime and be like, hey, we're doing this usability test. Are you interested in it? It'll be on this and this. Times will be this and this. And refreshments will be provided. So having staff involvement, having departmental involvement is really a key thing. And oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, in any case. Okay, let me get back on track. So the users, another thing to think about is, well, before I go on, so to what length do I put up notices around the institution? So if it's an open institution, if it's an open area where you have a lot of public moving through, I found that having the flyers up and all that sort of stuff, a couple weeks really is not going to cut it. You really need to have this stuff up temporarily, or especially if you have a web presence where users naturally go to see what's going on. I would say a month to 2 months, if possible, and kind of updating it. It has to be updated, of course. You have to start kind of provide a little hook stating, yeah, on such and such day we'll be doing our usability test, and isn't it exciting because we'll be able to get all of these extra services for you. So having that hook to really reel in those users is a great thing. And then, of course, a couple weeks later, you provide more information. If you attract the users to begin with, you get them interested, they'll be more likely to come back and look and see what's updated on what's going on with the test now. And once time comes to get the users, you'll have a public that is engaged, involved, and willing to participate. And that's a big thing. So yeah, so like I mentioned, flyers. There are a number of other things that you can do. So word of mouth always helps out, especially if the community is small. And kind of the legwork stuff, phone calls, emails, blog posts, text messaging, or stuff. Essentially, in every way possible that you can think of to market this study, the better. And especially if you've determined that you need to include specific user groups, say a number of, like in the Southeast, the number of Tlinkets you need. If you really know that you need a lot of Tlinkets to be test participants, well, go to where they are. Call the web administrator on the Tlingit and Haida websites. They have the Alaska Native Grant Camps and all of that sort of stuff. So marketing yourself to those other institutions where the users will be likely to visit is another highly beneficial practice to consider, to do. And even if you can, stopping on by and just shaking hands and saying, talking to the Filipino community recreation center or something like that, and introducing you, explaining what's going on, what you need, that can go a long ways to getting the right users to be test participants. And having the right users will make it so where you generate results that are much more impactful, much more beneficial. And so you have the users, or you know generally what's going to be, how you're going to interact with the users. The next step is to figure out what kind of testing are you going to do. Are you going to include eye tracking studies, remote testing? Do you have to do remote testing? What about task analysis? And I'm going to go over these as well. So what about card source? Do I have to do any site mock-ups? And site mock-ups kind of come into play when you're doing retesting. So I'm going to start this is eye tracking technology. It's been around for a number of years now. It is unfortunately one of those technologies that it's highly beneficial if you can afford it. And what eye tracking is that generally they have eyeglasses now that can track eye movements on the web page. And what the purpose is for figuring out layout problems on the website. And that way, if you're having them do a series of tasks to assess different portions of the website, having the eye tracking software available will make it so where if they're, say, searching for, like for the Alaska State Library website, one of the tasks that we had them do was to navigate to the journals and databases webpage and look up a specific journal. Well, we had a lot of issues with that because the journal that they looked up, that they were supposed to look up, they actually had to go a few pages further in, and they kept missing the link. So eye tracking will generate, it's called a heat map. So basically, it's a generalized version of, like the picture shows, the redder the area, so blue is the low end, red is the high end, orange, whatever. Those are the areas that the users, the test participants, look on the website the most. So they start, and users, people generally read a website in just a couple different ways. You can generally see, like in the middle picture, it almost looks like an F. The users generally go down. I'm showing my left hand right now, but generally down the left-hand side of the screen first, as well as going across the top, so like the header, the H2 portions of the page, and they either generally forms an F shape or an E shape, or as in the first picture, they look more across on the top of the page. The further down you get on the website, the web page itself, the more likely they're not going to be scanning all the way across. So keeping that in mind when designing new web pages or redesigning current web pages is very critical, because if you have your link to a specific key section of your website, if it's in the wrong spot on the page, if it's either too far down, too far to the right when you have an image that's attracting the eye elsewhere, they're not going to click on it. They're not even going to see it. And that was one of the main issues, or that was one main issue that we had with it. It had to deal with another task, but essentially that's one benefit of eye tracking. So the only downside is that it's technology. It costs money. So the general eye tracking software can range from, I contacted several several companies that offer eye tracking equipment for sale, and the price quotes that I got ranged from between $7,500 to $10,000. That's a lot of money. I couldn't afford that. I'm sure most institutions couldn't afford that. However, that said, there are lower cost technology that is being produced, and it's I was only able to find one specific eye tracking technology. It's still they finished designing, they finished the testing on it. It's called NUIA, N-U-I-A, or IA eye charm, and it's basically it costs $60, and it is also at the same time sufficiently sensitive enough to record eye movements. You can do head tracking testing by using your webcam and doing a little app and messing with the features some. But head tracking isn't that. It's like figuring. It's not that specific, and that's why I'm not really going to talk about that. Eye tracking is the way to go if you can afford it. So NUIA Eye Charm, it's this technology that's just coming out. It's the reason it's so cheap is that it's piggybacking on existing technology. So what they are using is they have an infrared sensor as well as some coding, of course, that it clips on the front end of an Xbox on the Kinect. I'm not sure if I assume both of you have heard of the Xbox Kinect. And it piggybacks on that. So you just clip on the front of it, and so essentially if you have a Kinect, you can get this, and it'll plug right on, it'll record eye movements, it'll generate heat maps. That said, it's not in production yet, but I suppose the whole point of me going into this little explanation is eye tracking is expensive right now, but in the new, soon-to-come future, there will be cheaper cheaper software, cheaper hardware available for purchase. So I wouldn't discount this method of testing if, say, a year down the road you know that you're going to be doing a usability test. Look it up, or look up current eye tracking software and see if there are more options that are made available to you. Remote testing, I'm not going to spend as much time on this, but the issues with remote testing are that there's technology issues. If you have test participants that aren't that tech savvy, you're really going to have to educate them firsthand just to make sure that the test goes off well. The remote testing has the advantage of being able to pull in more users for the testing itself. To facilitate this, there are a number of software that there's several different programs out there that are useful, and I didn't put it on the PowerPoint itself, but it's a website called techsmith.com, techsmith.com, and they have several different programs. One is called Moray, the other, and they have a simpler version as well. But the reason I mentioned them, they offer a free month-long subscription to utilize the Moray program. And it comes, you have full functionality, you are able to record the computer screen, you are able to record the mouse movements, as well as simultaneously you are able to record via their webcam kind of their facial expressions. So that is something to consider. Moray is a great program, it's free, it's got, generally I would have it on a computer that isn't 10 years old, just because you don't want, when you're compiling the video at the very end of the testing, you don't want that to freeze. So the task analysis studies, those are essentially you have a series of tasks that you have your users produce, or well, try to succeed at doing, that assess different portions of your website. And generally in a 60-minute test, which most tests really should be between 60 to 90 minutes, I like 60 minutes because it's an even hour, it's easier to get test participants in there, and you generally want between 7 to 10 tasks for your user to complete. That allows for the user to kind of fumble around for 8 to 10 minutes on one task while get another task done in only 3 minutes. And yeah, so that's essentially that. And the tasks, you'll kind of figure, if you know that you're going to do 3 different portions of the website, obviously break up the tasks accordingly. Card sorts, those are types of tests that are generally, you can do them online, but you can also quite easily do them in person. And what those are, you end up using, so you have the home page on your website, and it's got a series of links that take you to different portions of the website. And what you do then, you write down those links onto cards, and generally for a 60-minute test, you'd want between 70 to 90 cards. And that's a lot of cards when you think about it, but at the same time, if your site's large enough, it really isn't a lot of cards. So between 70 to 90 cards is enough for one test participant to sort them out within an hour. And the point of those is you have them sort the cards out. Well, the thing is, they don't know what how the cards were organized on your website. You ask them to sort them out into groups that they choose. You include blank cards for them to create new heading or new cards if they want. If they think perchance something is lacking, then you have them create titles for those headings. So for the piles. So they've sorted. So they start with, say, 73 cards, a bunch of different terms on each card. You have them started at the very end. There will be preferably 5 or 6 different piles of cards. They'll have labeled those piles of cards. And what you then do afterwards is you compare how the page was how the page was broken apart. So if the test participants have collected, say, if you have on your page a heading for state employees or for the public, and there's a number of links in both of those, and they've conglomerated all of those into a heading for the public or a pile for the public, then you know that, well, maybe some of the information that you're presenting on your website isn't quite specific enough. Maybe it needs to be more targeted and more recognizable as belonging in that section for state employees. That said, do you guys have any questions about card sorts in general? I know that was kind of a long description, but...
No, I didn't have any. It sounds like a nice, simple tool to use.
Okay, yeah, and sorry, I should have specified which individual, but yeah, it's a really great tool. So, yeah, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move along here. So if you could go ahead and mic or mute, there you go. So I mentioned site mockups. Site mockups are, oh, you know what I forgot to mention? I'm sure you guys already noticed it, but if you wanted to do online testing, Usability is a great place to do it. It offers free 3-day subscriptions, and you can create your cards, and you can have users come in and sort the cards out. So it's great. It's only 3 days though, so you really kind of have to have all the ducks in a row to get this thing done. Site mockups come into play when you are wanting to do retesting. So you've done all the testing, you figured out that there's this and this and this needs to be corrected, then you've corrected it. Now you have potentially a new site or new pages, reformatted pages. But before you want to publish those pages to the web, you want to be careful. You don't, perhaps in remaking the website, you created even more issues and stuff was even more confusing. If you have the time to do retesting, site mockups are great. So i.e. creating just basic web pages that aren't published to the internet, and you have them run through a few more tasks, just to see if you fix the issues. And I talked about this earlier, so 5 rounds of about the number of test participants. So the card sorts and the task analysis studies, generally you want 5 tests to be performed. And if you know, 5 is great. 5 will get you a good amount of reveal, and as the bottom of the page shows, 85% of the issues on your website, or of the portion that was tested. And he's had his his students perform, I think, dozens and dozens of tests, of usability tests, with varying numbers of test participants, and that was, and the statistical data has shown that 85% of the issues in the site were revealed when the test had 5 test users. So, yeah. So actually performing the study. This section will cover how to choose a proper testing location, how to make sure that the data is collected adequately, and also how to limit testing bias. And we're over halfway done right now, so so it'll kind of be a bit quicker from here on out. So choosing the proper test location. It may seem like a no-brainer, but if you have a room that is quiet, it is well maintained, clean, available for the entire testing phase, that's really what you should be shooting for. And there's nothing worse than having a test be performed and have your user be distracted because the table wasn't cleaned off properly, or the keyboard wasn't dusted when it should have been, and there's grime in the keyboard. I mean, I'm sure you would hate to have that ruin a test just because of some cleanliness issue. So also, if you have the testing performed off-site, if you're testing a lot of state employees at satellite sites around the state, generally the research that I found, or my research has shown that try to have it done in a familiar location, so i.e. their cubicle, their desk, whatever. And also, if you're doing off-site testing, ensure that you communicate to their supervisors that they're doing this testing during such and such time, and that if possible, try to have it so where that extraneous distractions are limited, i.e. put a no disturbing sign, or let other staff in the department that tester works in, make them aware that they need to not interrupt this guy or this girl when they're doing the test. So, okay, so ensuring adequate collection of data. Protect your data, and I put an exclamation mark in that because it is critically important when you are doing this testing, especially if technology is involved, to have a backup option for doing the recording. Obviously, if the testing is going to be done off-site, that might be a little more difficult. But the whole point is you're recording the test. Say if you're doing the task analysis, you're recording it via Array or some other, well, I wouldn't say webcam. I would really do Array or one of those other free platforms. If for some reason there's a power outage, the program freezes, the computer that they're using freezes, you really don't want to have to go through the trouble of retesting that individual. Why go through the heartache? Simply have another option if there is a camcorder available, or preferably a camcorder if possible, but having that other film available will make it so We'll make it so where that you do get the data that you need, and you don't have any technology issues hold up the testing. Because again, the whole point is to get this thing done as quickly as possible, professionally as possible, and with as little as bias as possible. So, and of course also, when you get it done, back up your data, save it elsewhere in 2 different locations. That's just kind of par for the course. You've done all of this work, you've collected this data. Why have a hard drive crash ruin 2 months worth of work? Just simply get it elsewhere. Put it on a thumb drive if nothing else. So another key aspect of ensuring adequate collection of data, especially during the test, is not to waste the time of your users. When you're starting the test, say if you're the test proctor, you really want to only have 5 minutes introduction at the very beginning, 5 minutes communication at the very end, with about 2 to 3 minutes wrap up. So questions they may have, that sort of stuff. That'll leave about 50 minutes for them to perform the test, leaving as much time available for them to do the test. And my research has revealed, it's shown to me quite clearly that the point is not to spend 10 minutes asking them questions on this and that, and this, what issues did they have doing this, and what, say the task 2 versus task 3. You really want the data, and you really want the data to reveal the issues in the website. So say for the task analysis, if you have 4 tasks that reveal that if they're trying to find, in the case of a library, if they're trying to navigate to the electronic databases page, they keep on going to the getting sidetracked elsewhere, or they simply stop looking because the electronic articles and databases page is too deep in the website. So you really want that data rather than the subjective question and Q&A session afterwards. So that is the most important thing. If you have time afterwards for questions, great, it helps, but focus on collecting the data. And limiting testing bias. It is very easy, say if you perform the same test 3 times and you're on your 4th test and you've got 1 more after that, and you've got a person having issue and they're like, well, I can't find this. What's going on? How do I get to this section of the website? Or what's up with this card? What do I do with this card that's labeled history? Not interjecting yourself into the test is another thing that is critically important, because if you do that, if you help them succeed in performing the task or succeed in adequately putting the cards into separate piles, then you're really invalidating the results. And that's the last thing you want to do. One way to limit testing bias at the very start, you will have a short description of what their responsibilities are and what you will answer, what kind of questions you will answer. Having a pre-prepared script that you read, preferably in the same tone for each test, is a great way to help limit that bias. And essentially, stay out of the test. That's essentially that. And another thing I forgot to mention, but something that you should highly consider, if you're filming these individuals and you're reviewing the data, it's good to have them sign a release form stating that you will be filming. They will be recorded visually and so they will be recorded, and this data, and have that release form explain what the data is going to be used for, how long the data is going to be kept, that sort of stuff. You have them sign and date. And the key thing is you need to witness that. So you have them sign and date it, you sign and date it. And that's just to ensure any heartache down the road. And it also kind of sets up good policy, so to speak, for, well, what do you do with this data once the testing is completed? And you have this great paper, all these great suggestions for a redesign of the test. Well, if you treat the data good, or if you don't abuse the confidentiality, because it is a confidentiality thing coming into play here. You're having an individual sit down, they're going to be voicing complaints about the website. Well, especially if they're staff, if they're sitting down and they're saying, man, I cannot stand my web developer's mindset in creating this. Why does this layout have to be like this? That needs to be a safe location for them to voice those complaints. And that release form helps to kind of show them that, yes, this will be protected data and you will not show this to everyone. So the reviewing the data and presenting the results. So now we've completed the testing. You have okay, yeah. So it'll show how to compile the raw data and how to make a report that is authoritative and logical and well presented and all that sort of stuff. So after you've completed your testing, you'll have a number. Okay, so as in the case of card sorting, if you have 5 rounds of card sorting testing done, you're going to have, and if you've had 70 cards for each testing, you're going to have, if you create new cards for each test, then that's 350 different cards with about 25 different piles and separated out, and it can get to be a mess. So how do you organize all this information? And card sorts especially you can organize them using simple Microsoft programs. Excel is great. I say Excel, and then you can use Word to just display that information afterwards. And I won't get into it in too great a detail, but organizing the card sort, or say, okay, you got done with test number 1, card sort test number 1. What you should then do is have, and what I found is helpful, having rubber band each pile separately, preventing mix-ups, and then afterwards label or number each, starting from one pile and go to the other, go through all of the other cards, flip the card over and number it. What that allows you to do later on is it helps when you're representing the data in Excel. And I'll like I said before, I'll send you the Excel data that I have from the card sorts the card sort that I did, and you'll see how I created a specific table. I broke it down into headings, I broke it down into subheadings, I broke it down into cards. So i.e. What link text, so they're called link text. So the cards itself has a title, so text on it. So I essentially broke it down in as many different ways as possible, and labeling, ensuring that I numbered that essentially all the information you can think of, put it into a spreadsheet, and from there you can then create, it's what's called a pivot table. And it'll be too confusing for me to try to explain it, but I do have a good explanation for pivot tables, it's that website right there. That's a pretty well-rounded explanation for what a pivot table is, what you can do with it, some of the basic and advanced features, that sort of stuff. If that explanation doesn't work, and this was just from a simple a search query, there are other explanations out there. So when you're doing that, when you're figuring out or organizing the card sort information, utilize Excel. It's got almost pretty much everything you'll ever need in laying the cards out and figuring out as much information as you can from those cards. I do have some information right here. If you know that you have enough extra time to get enough test participants, if you want to try to generate statistically significant data, i.e. data that is reproducible. So if you redo this test or this study 5 or 6 times down the road, if you include enough test participants for the card sort, for the eye tracking and whatnot, if you have a high enough, it's called N, a high enough population, it makes it so that the data results are reproducible. So you can then figure out statistical information from those card sort, and that's where the pivot tables come into play here. But to do that, to make that information, make it so where you can try to glean statistical information from that, you need more users. So 15 to 20 users is great. And that's what Jacob Nielsen, that's what he suggests, that's what his research has illustrated, that's a good number. And that's for the task analysis as well as the card sorts. 15 to 20, that'll give you statistically good results. If you're trying to generate the heat maps, so the images before that I showed you earlier, that requires more. It requires a minimum of 39 individual tests to be performed. And that'll make it so it's called having stable heat maps. So basically, with the statistical information, when the heat maps are essentially are going to be reproducible and look the same. So if they're testing the same website, if you have enough users in the testing, then the heat maps will, you'll be able to reproduce that. So, I just kind of went over that. You can just nod if that was sufficiently well explained. If you do have any questions, is that good? I mean, okay. Just wanted to make sure there. But of course, there's a plethora amount of information on how to do statistical analysis available online. Okay, so we're just about near the end of this. So crafting the document. There are many ways to craft a document. Obviously, you can just throw together the results, have them in a list, have them in a bullet format, and try to present that and go from there. Or you can, you're more than welcome to do that. I'm not saying don't do that. However, it's if you're wanting to try to impress your superiors and also limit confusion, having a specific and well thought out manner in creating your document is something to consider. So that said, there are different ways to create the documents, obviously. If your institution has, or your department has specific formula already set up for saying, well, the document needs to be in this format, this layout, and what for studies. If they've already figured out what's the best layout for that department, you should use that first, of course. Another good resource to go to is usability.gov. It's got obviously authoritative information. they might not necessarily, they offer suggestions for how to create layouts, but generally I wouldn't go to them and expect them to have a layout already pre-prepared for you, or if they do have it, I couldn't find it and I was looking. So maybe that's a usability issue for them. I don't know. So the last thing you can do for creating a document that appears to be logical, it illustrates your mindset in creating the study, it shows how the testing went about, it shows your methodology, essentially an academic paper. And that said, having a paper that is laid out in a manner that in a specific academic field there are a number of different fields out there. I would suggest if you want to try to go the route of, I mean, I'm sure both of you have seen plenty of academic papers and seen the layouts of those papers. They're not all the same, of course. They're not, but within certain profession or fields of study, they have general layout restrictions and general ways that you should present your data, present the results, and all that sort of stuff. I would personally suggest utilizing layouts and guidelines that for the library and informational sciences field. And I say that because the LIS field is already, they do usability studies left and right. The adaptation that you might have to do is much more minimalized than, say, if you're trying to utilize an academic layout from the mathematics profession. They treat information differently. So, okay, I have 5 minutes. Wow, I timed that great. So that said, use the LIS field. You have the APA citation. I would suggest using APA or citing your results, making your paper as authoritative as humanly possible. When it comes time to present your results, even if you did the study as perfectly as you could, if you failed at presenting the results or creating a document that doesn't attract the attention of your superiors, the people who will be making the design change decisions, if it doesn't attract their attention, if it doesn't successfully communicate to them, if it doesn't successfully bring them over to thinking that, yeah, hey, they did a great job on this, I really need to change it because of this and this and this and this layout, and then what's the point? You need to really essentially the point is don't do a half, a poor job on a document. So that's it. Okay, so conclusion, just numerous ways for keeping costs down, hiring free help, focusing your effort on targeted specific user groups, getting a free trial software, utilizing programs such as Excel to organize and assess data. That's it. And the suggested reading, I just have some different information here. Obviously, I've usability.gov. It's a wonderful resource for you. Some information, I would personally go to the Nielsen Norman Group articles, just because he's been putting out articles since 1990, and his latest one.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Artemat Video Conferencing Services. The conference is scheduled to end in 3 minutes. Would you like me to extend it? And if yes, for how long?
I would say 5 minutes, if that.
Sounds
I'm right
good.
at
Thank
the
you.
end of it. All right, thank you, Artem. Okay, so yeah, that said, there is usability.gov, Nielsen Norman Group, and then a couple other resources there as well. There are numerous aspects to website usability. I didn't touch on search engine optimization. There are plenty of books out there for you. So I want to get both of your, if if I could get both of your email addresses so I can send you the PowerPoint, send you all the other data that I can have, so you can utilize that. So the 10-ish.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm still terrible with numbers.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's Aubrey, A-U-B as in Bravo, R-E-Y, dot Raby, R-A-B as in Bravo, Y, at Alaska.
Okay, so I'm just going to say it back. Aubrey, A-U-B-R-E-Y, dot Raby, R-A-B-Y, at alaska.gov. All right, thank you.
And mine is, Sigrid, and my email is S as in Sam, B as in boy, R-U-D as in dog, I-E. So it's sbrudy at uaa.alaska.edu.
All right. So I have that, and I will make sure to send you guys that information. And kind of just in summation here, if I did touch on a lot of information, hopefully it was beneficial to you. Hopefully it offers some insights and really will help you out. If you do have any other questions, anything you would like to bring up, sorry, the last lady to speak. I have terrible
No,
with names.
Sigrid, that's okay.
Okay. Did you have any questions that
No,
like
that was very thorough. That was very thorough. That's very helpful. Thank you, and thank you for
All right.
sending that information.
Yeah, I'll get that over to you.
Okay.
And what about you?
No questions. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the email so I can go back over it again.
Okay, all right, sure thing. And yeah, I'll get that information. That's all to you guys, or to you, and that's all the stuff that I had. Thanks for sitting in with me. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
All right.